Welcome back to Nothing But the Truth. I'm Trudy Stern, and we have a very important show for you. We have said on this show before that we are currently fighting a global war of radical fundamentalist Islam against Western values. We've broken down the different fronts of this war, from Africa to Russia to the Middle East and Israel, of course. But tonight I want to focus on a front of this war occurring in our own country, and the battle is being waged in our educational system. This is a front unlike what we're used to seeing because there are no traditional weapons of war that we typically associate with conflict. There are no tanks, no rockets, no physical casualties. In fact, there's no injured, maimed, or dead. Instead, it's more subtle, but much more lethal because it captures generations and turns them into warriors for their side. The battlefield is the classroom, the curriculum, and the culture shaping young minds. And while so much of the national conversation since October 7th has focused on the explosion of anti-Semitism on college campuses, we need to be very clear. This did not happen spontaneously. These eruptions are not random, emotional reactions to world events. They are the visible result of something far deeper. For decades, anti-American and anti-Western democratic values have been quietly taking root in our universities, growing under the radar, shaping a generation without anyone truly paying attention. This is not an accident. It's part of a strategic and deliberate plan crafted years ago by the Muslim Brotherhood to infiltrate and influence American academic institutions. By hijacking our universities, they understood that they could shape the worldview of future American leaders, educators, policymakers, and voters. And today we are witnessing the consequences of that long-term strategy playing out in real time. That brings us to our guest tonight. Jeffrey Lax is not only a professor at CUNY, he is the chair of the Department of Business at Kingsborough Community College. He's become an important and influential voice in the national conversation about anti-Semitism and the ideological battles unfolding across America's campuses. In addition to his work as a department chair and advocate, Jeff is frequently featured on major broadcast outlets as an expert commentator, helping unpack the institutional failures, cultural shifts, and threats emerging from academia. He has been on the front lines exposing discrimination, institutional bias, and the broader forces shaping this dangerous moment in higher education. And his willingness to speak out has made him a respected and impactful voice in this fight. Today, he's here to help us understand what the battleground really is and how we can fight it. Jeff, it's so great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, Trudy. Great to be with you.
So I want to begin with something that you laid out so powerfully in your op-ed in the New York Post, because it shows just how far CUNY has fallen. I remember CUNY as a very warm, social place filled with academia and students eager to learn and very friendly about 25 years ago or so. Don't want to really date myself, but I do recall the campus being like that. And now it's just become so different. All we do is see these protests and hostility and anger all around. So you wrote in this post op-ed about a job listing for a Palestinian studies instructor, not to teach history or culture, but to teach anti-Semitic propaganda. The listing explicitly sought someone who would teach that Israel is an apartheid settler colonial state committing genocide. You wrote, it was one more example of CUNY's steep decline from a proud institution of higher learning dedicated to seeking truth to a cult-like Klan intent on anti-Semitic indoctrination. You pointed out that it took Governor Hochul stepping in and ordering CUNY to shut down the ad. But then you highlight the deeper issue. Even though CUNY's chancellor claimed he agreed with Hochul, you wrote, then why did Thompson and his board of trustees vote to approve that curriculum many months ago? And why didn't the chancellor remove the curriculum himself? So, and you explain that from your 16 years on the curriculum committees. No curriculum ever gets approved until the university and the CUNY Board of Trustees vote on it. Take us through that entire process. Tell us about that whole situation, because I think it's emblematic of where CUNY has come.
Great question. It's actually a fascinating question because, shockingly, I think it's super important what you're asking me, and I've never been asked this before on an interview, which is really interesting. And I would love to talk about this because it's so horrifying what's going on. So, yeah, Hunter College had a curriculum, and I'll take you through the process at CUNY in a second and really show people how the sausage is made. Because as a department chair, I see that. I serve on the curriculum committee at my campus. So I see exactly what's going on. And I know the process of how it goes through CUNY, how it gets approved ultimately by NYSED, the New York State Education Department. So in particular, the incident you're talking about, and there are many of these, this is just the one that happened to get in the news that day. But this happens all the time. I'm certain that this exists throughout CUNY. In fact, I know that at other campuses, they have similar curricula. But in this case, Hunter College had approved what it was a job ad. The reason why this went public was the ad leaked. And the ad was very specific for the first time about looking for somebody who was clearly who would have been an anti-Semitic teacher. And obviously used all the classic tropes about Israel, that they're genocidal, settler, colonial, apartheid, all those horrific, false, debunked tropes. And so what happened was, I want to really focus in on what Hochul did, because Hochul is a total fraud. Hochul comes in, and at the time I gave her some credit, because she comes in and said, well, we can't have this. This sounds terrible. And while she doesn't necessarily have the power to tell CUNY what to do in terms of curriculum, she can get rid of people. She can get rid of the chancellor like that. And she should have done that years ago. So I don't give her credit overall. But she said, well, I don't want this ad in there. Okay. So CUNY suddenly says, we agree with you. So obviously, as you stated, that's totally ridiculous, because the process at CUNY is it gets approved at the college level, and then it goes to the CUNY Board of Trustees. So that means that every single CUNY Board of Trustee member, and these are powerful people, they said yes on this curriculum.
Wait a minute. Every single hire has to go through the Board of Trustees at CUNY?
Yes, absolutely. Mark Lamont Hill was approved by the Board of Trustees. Now, do I know what the vote was? No. But Mark Lamont Hill, CUNY has recently, CUNY used to put out the minutes of the board meetings, and now they've been hiding it. Nobody can find it. I used to know exactly where to go to find that information that I would like to know about these things that you're asking me. And I can't find it. They're hiding it somewhere, which is a disgrace because they're a government agency. They can't hide it, but they are hiding it anyway. But yes, they vote on every hire. They voted on this anti-Semitic curriculum. But the real scam here's the real scam of Hochul. She had a problem with the ad. The problem was not with the ad. The problem was with the courses. These courses have not changed. Yes, they took down the ad. They put in a new ad that didn't have those disgusting terms, but they're still looking for the same type of instructor. And the classes that use those terms still exist. So what effect did taking the job ad? They're just going to hire somebody who's going to teach the classes that already exist, that are anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, and filled with tropes. So Hochul knew what she was doing. She knew it was to placate. All she was doing was placating the Jewish community and the CUNY community. And she knew that in the end, this class is still going to happen, and they're going to hire whoever they want. And it is absolutely, to me, crosses the border from, criticizing Israel to pure anti-Semitism.
So that is very, very, very troubling. But how did we get from a place of wonderful academia, social harmony 25 years ago to what we have today? How did that happen? How did that decline happen?
Oh, it was system. So I wrote about this in an op-ed. I think my first ever op-ed in the New York Post was over Pesach in 2023. And I wrote about the systemic rot at CUNY. And I think it started around 2015. Now, first of all, I went to CUNY. I was a student at CUNY. I went to Brooklyn College. I went to Baruch for my business degree. So I have a long history in CUNY. And you're right, when I don't want to age myself either. But I graduated CUNY. I was a CUNY guy, and I always wanted to teach in CUNY. And what it has become, as you said in your brilliant monologue, is just complete systemic rot in terms of not just education, but they are actually indoctrinating students. The average professor's main goal today is not what it was 25 years ago, not even what it was 15 years ago, to be honest with you. It is to indoctrinate, right? And we see people all around campuses indoctrinating. We know that they're indoctrinating in their classrooms. But when did this start? So let me answer that question. And it's gonna freak a lot of people out when they hear this, because I think some people don't know this. I think this really escalated around 2015, 2016, and not just at CUNY, but all over the place. But I saw it happening behind the scenes at CUNY when the provost of my school said, "We have too many Jews here." And
Where,
there were
where did he say that?
I'm sorry?
Where did somebody say that?
The provost of my campus was saying that we have too many Jews. There would, like, anytime there would be a hire as a department chair, if I want to hire someone in my department, the next step after the department approves the person is the president or the provost. So in our case, during that time, it was the provost who would make the final, rubber stamp, or what, it really wasn't a rubber stamp, it was the opposite, but would give the final note of approval on a hire.
So you are not talking about too many Jewish students. You're talking about too many Jewish professors.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is.
Oh, okay. No,
let me clarify.
I wasn't clear on that, so it's possible my listeners weren't also. So
the problem is not these students are not real. The thing you see on TV, we know that these students are what I call fake students. Listen, the typical student today is the same as they ever were. 99.9% of students who I see in my classroom who are wonderful, all they want to do is go to school, get a degree, graduate, and get a good job. That has not changed. So the encampments, for example, that's a great example. If you go back and look at the encampments, the Gaza encampments, so when that all really blew up at Columbia, those students from Columbia, I'll put it in quote because we know a lot of them were not students. They're paid. We know now that they're paid for by foreign organizations. And some of them are basically, that's like their full-time job. They marched from Columbia to City College. So security, and I'll give you some inside information here. Security at City College saw these students. They saw it happening in real time, and they wanted to stop it. They saw the destruction. And by the way, I just want to modify one thing from your brilliant monologue. There have been injuries. So this is not just an ideological thing. There have been, especially Jewish people, have been injured because of these encampments, because of violent uprisings on the campuses and campus adjacent. On my campus, a Kingsborough student took a baseball bat and actually went around looking for Jewish people and ended up finding one with a yarmulke and beat him up with a bat and was actually convicted of a hate crime. I'm sorry?
Wow, that is unbelievable, and I do stand corrected. So yes, there
are a lot more incidents like that. That's not the only incident. There were incidents at Harvard. There were at City College. Here's some inside information that I was referring to, which is related to the other thing I was going to tell you. There was a security, but nobody knows this, by the way. This is breaking news to your listeners exclusively, and you can get that from people on the inside if you really dig hard enough. A security officer was injured very badly. Nobody knows this at City College, very badly. In fact, they were at the last time I heard, I can't reveal my source. I almost slipped for a second there, which I never do. But with the last time I spoke to my source, This person was out for a year because of physical injury. Why? Because of these crazy, lunatic, radical, Marxist paid protesters who marched from Columbia, the encampment people, to City College, tore down the American flag from City College, historic City College, and raised the Palestinian flag. And during that melee, this officer was injured very seriously, trying to arrest someone, by the way, who was belligerent and fighting back, and was seriously injured. And so there have been many people, unfortunately, seriously injured. And we know that students have been injured and property seriously damaged. City College, I think, had millions of dollars of property damage, if I'm not mistaken. But the real scoop that I wanted to tell you was, I have a source that has told me, and when I say source, I'm talking top level source, beyond reproach, that told me that at City College, when these encampment lunatics were marching up to City College from Columbia, that they told the chancellor, and they told, let me name him, Felix Matos Rodriguez, and they told Hector Batista, very important name for your listeners, because he's on the Mamdani transition team right now, and he's a horrible guy. And they told also William Thompson, who's the chair of the Board of Trustees. Three big names. All three of them, by the way, are, not surprisingly to me, but will be to some, are on the Mamdani transition team. What does that tell you? Well, we know Batista is a horrible guy. And what my source told me was that those three, and especially Batista, they wanted these encampments to happen. They wanted this violence to come to CUNY's campuses because security told them, we could stop this. We can make sure this doesn't come to our campus. And this trio, this Mamdani transition team trio said, no, let them come. Let it happen here. And again, a lot of these are not students. And the chancellor has lied about this in testimony over the years, but a lot of these students, about what he knows, are definitely not CUNY students. So yeah, the problem is faculty and a movement of Marxists and really DSA organized Marxists that has infected our campuses. And I saw a major shift and change because people stopped being hired if they were Jewish at CUNY many years ago. And the biggest movement was around 2015, 2016.
So in 2015, 2016, the chancellor actually stated we have too many Jewish professors.
No. No, but I'll tell you something about him too. My campus. So CUNY has 25 campuses. CUNY is the largest urban university in the country, about 240,000 students, 25 campuses. My campus is we have a big campus, but it's one of 25 campuses. On my campus, the provost said that, but I'm in touch as a department chair. You have to be in touch at every level and with your colleague department chairs and other faculty at other campuses. So I've heard the same story repeatedly from so many colleagues across CUNY that they're not hiring Jews right now. I know people that have gotten they have made phone calls, inquiries of interest, or sent resumes, and were actually told off the records, and I've heard this from them personally, that they were told, well, CUNY's not really hiring Jews right now. And they were told this not by people who wanted it, by people who are friendly to them, who just happen to know you're wasting your time. Don't apply because you're wasting your time. But what I can tell you is, so in my original, I think I started to talk about this before and I got a little sidetracked, but in my original post-op-ed, the first one I ever did on Pesach 2023, so during that time, CUNY had gotten to the point where there were zero senior leaders who were Jewish at the Central University, zero, and zero presidents who were Jewish. This is in the spring of 2023 when the last president who was Jewish from Hunter was about to retire. And so that can't happen in New York City by accident. It's not possible. You walk down a street in New York City, you bump into a Jew. It's 20% Jewish. In Brooklyn, it's 22% Jewish. So, and it was a very steady decline. You saw Jews disappearing from the top of CUNY systemically over the years, I would say from 2015 on. And to the point in 2023, there were about 70 senior leaders, including presidents, and none of them, zero, were Jewish. I can tell you that at my school right now, of the senior leadership, none of them are Jews, which is insane. Brooklyn has a higher percentage of Jewish people than New York City does, even. So these things are not accidental. And as we look at different campuses, we have people in my group Safe Campus who investigate this stuff. We see that it's true on most campuses now, that really there are no Jews anymore employed at any leadership position. And it's just, that doesn't happen by accident. It's disgusting. It's CUNY Central, which traditionally people should know had 10, 11, 12, 13 senior leadership people who were Jewish, which makes sense in a city that's 22%, 20% Jewish, now still has zero. So one of the reasons CUNY's hiding information now, they're hiding, I told you off the air before we went on today, that they're hiding a lot of information online. They're doing very sneaky things to make it seem like there are Jews in their senior administration by playing with what they put on their website, but it's not true. There are no senior leaders at CUNY that I'm aware of since 2023 who were Jewish. And that's insane when you think about that.
Well, yes, it's insane when you think about the fact that the Jewish community built CUNY. Lots of buildings were put up by Jewish supporters. So that is really unbelievably shocking. What about you as a department head? So were you given a mandate in terms of who you can hire, and have you listened to that?
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons I decided to come forward all the way back in 2015 was because we were given a hard time if we wanted to hire someone Jewish. And in my case, we had we had a vacancy for an accounting professor, and we had someone come to us who was really the gold standard hire for an accounting professor. He had a PhD. He was already published. He already had tons of teaching experience. He was moving from a different area, so he needed to go find a new campus. So he wasn't fired. He wasn't in trouble. He was a perfect candidate. And CUNY turned him down for no reason. And he came out and said, and the provost of my college turned him down after our department gave him a unanimous 5-0 vote. The provost at that time turned him down, and he wore a yarmulke. And he came out at the time publicly and said that he believes he was turned down because he was wearing a yarmulke. I totally agree with him. I was with him when he met with the provost and the president. They saw the yarmulke, and he described how the looks on their faces appeared to him when they saw him for the first time wearing a yarmulke. So I lost him. I lost a tremendous candidate. By the way, then he went to Brooklyn College after he didn't get the job at our campus. And the same thing happened. The department, these are the experts. The departments know what the experts are in the disciplinary areas. They again unanimously voted for him. And again, the provost and president turned him down. Then he went to a third CUNY campus, and the same thing happened again. So finally, he, for some reason, chose Brooklyn College to sue. I guess it was his preference of where to work out of the three. And Brooklyn College eventually settled with him. And now, just to show you how right we are about the quality of this candidate, and that had nothing to do with his pedagogy, had nothing to do with his scholarship, had nothing to do with his experience, because he was really gold standard. Today, he is the chair of the accounting department at Brooklyn College. This guy who was turned down by the administrations at all three campuses. And we know, I have spoken to other chairs. I have spoken to 2 other chairs who have specifically told me the same story that has happened to me, which is upper level administrators seeing a Jewish looking name. I don't want to use examples because I don't want to out anybody who wasn't hired. Let me think of one that has. So let's say they see Michal, Michal, on that of someone we want to hire. They will actually say things like, well, I see the name here. If you want to hire this person, Michal, you have to hire 2 Black people, 2 Hispanic people, whatever, right? I mean, they make deal. You have to make a deal to hire a Jew. And that happened for years. And I'm convinced things like that are still happening. No doubt in my mind.
Do you know how this system happened? How did it evolve from, from what it had been to what it is now? Like in 2015, you said you feel that that was a turning point. But how? In what way?
Well, I think the union's a big problem. I think the union, people need to understand, is truly deeply Marxist. And this is not hyperbole. Joe Biden, I know, used to always say everything's not hyperbole when it was, but I'm actually, when I say something's not hyperbole, it's not. They are Marxists. And
well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So we, my listeners and myself, don't know all of these details that you're talking about. So let's just review for one second. So curricula, in the beginning, we talked about the curricula being anti-Semitic, and it is a definite strategy that this curricula is anti-Semitic. They were posting that, they had to be teaching BDS and, that Israel is a genocide, that was curricula. We discussed the fact that professors were hired not because they were qualified, and actually weren't hired if they were Jewish. So there was a systematic strategy to not hire or eliminate Jewish professors from CUNY. And now we're talking about a union. So what is the union? The union, tell us about what the union is, who belongs to this union. Is it a teachers union? What is it?
Yeah, so the PSC CUNY, the Professional Staff Congress of CUNY, is the faculty union for the university. It's got 30,000 members, approximately. They are lunatics. They are Marxists. They work closely with the DSA. We have a lot of great sources in the union embedded, and we have emails that shows how corrupt they are and how evil they are. By the way, and just for your listeners to understand, if you go to one of these union meetings, they call each other comrade. They walk around saying, comrade, comrade this, comrade that. They're not joking. It's not a joke. It is serious. That's who they are. They really are Marxists. And so there are leaked DSA memos that have showed that they've been trying to embed the CUNY union because it's so powerful, so big, so large, and they work with very closely with the California union, which is the same. So this is really very much a national issue. These unions really work together. And the DSA memo was saying, we want to hire more, socialist instructors. It was one of their goals that came out. And we know that the union wants that too. So that's a part of it for sure. And what happens is when you hire more and more Marxist anti-Semitic teachers, eventually some of them end up becoming department chairs. And when that happens is when you get the anti-Semitic curriculum that you're talking about, because department chairs generally are the ones who put forward curricula proposals for their campuses. So if you have a Marxist who hates Jews, you're very likely to get some curriculum that has something disgusting in there.
Do you think that what's going on at CUNY is emblematic of what's going on campuses across the country?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I have said from the beginning, years before October 7th, that what happens at CUNY with this situation, because the op-ed that you referred to, I think it was an earlier op-ed that I wrote, was before October 7th, was months before. There was no way, obviously, I could know that this heinous day would ever happen. And I wrote this op-ed in the New York Post, and I urge people to go read it because the details are in there. And it's so sick and disgusting. So I knew exactly what was happening. I 100% knew what was happening around the country because CUNY is huge. We work with many campuses across the country. So I knew what was happening elsewhere. I had heard similar stories from other people. But the union is a big part of that because they're connected nationwide. We are part of the AFT. We are basically a sub group of the AFT. So we're part of.
What is the AFT? Tell us.
American Federation of Teachers, which is enormous, right? It's a huge organization. with a lot of power. And actually the AFT is under the AFL-CIO. So, it's huge. But again, the rot is system wide, systemic, and pervasive.
Wow. Really, really unbelievable. So you have said previously, and I know you're very active with op-eds and on media, on the media, you're very often cited as an expert on this topic on many different mainstream media outlets. That this is not just anti-Semitism, but this is a takeover of Western values. Can you expand upon that? Can you explain that to the listeners?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Jews are never where it ends. The Jews are where it starts. The Jews are a symptom of a much bigger problem, which is that the same people who are calling Israel genocidal and all these tropes, settler, colonial, apartheid, such disgustingly false tropes, are the same people who shout death to America, who are blocking the streets in New York City, blocking thoroughways, blocking main entrances to public buildings. You're talking about the Nordine Kiswanis, all these terrible people within our lifetime, SJP, all these horrible types of groups, and there are so many of them that I hesitate to start listing them. They are. So what are you doing when you're trying to stop Americans driving on a highway, on a thoroughfare, and trying to block governmental buildings from being accessed? You're really trying to dismantle the infrastructure of the United States. And this is coming very largely from academia. And what starts in academia also often throughout history spreads out to the country at large, which is what, again, I knew this 10 years ago. I saw this coming because I saw the infestation on the campuses and I knew it would stretch out to the public. It's funny, one of the most common, you asked me the most uncommon question that I've never gotten, but the most common question I ever get is, did you know what would happen after 10/7? And so, in other words, the way it's usually asked to me is, were you surprised? And I say, absolutely not. I knew that the reaction to October 7th, as awful as that day was, I couldn't predict that day. No one could. Horrible. I mean, I'm a grandchild of 4 Holocaust survivors, but I knew the reaction would be anti-Israel, which is crazy. Most people were shocked. I was not shocked. I knew who these people were. I've looked them in the eyes. I've seen so many stories, which we can't possibly get to in 30 minutes, but I could tell you another time. But I knew that these despicable, hateful, anti-American, they are all anti-American. Listen, think about it broadly speaking, why are Marxists working with Islamists? Because if you really think about it, they don't have anything in common ideologically. It doesn't actually make any sense at all. There's no reason for Marxists to work with radical Islamists. And ultimately, once they take over, once they accomplish their goals, and what is the only goal they both have is the destruction of America's government and the destruction of Western culture. That is the only thing that radical Islam and Marxism has in common. The only thing. So that is clearly what they're working towards. You're going to see this with Mamdani. He's already set out his agenda very publicly. You're going to see it with him and people like him across the country because it doesn't make sense. So the only thing a Marxist and an Islamist has in common is they hate Jews and they hate Western culture.
What an amazing observation. We've actually had, we've talked about this for, years since 10/7, and that connection is really important, and it hasn't been made so clearly as you just made it. So that is very, very unbelievable. Last question before we have to say goodnight to you. Is, can this be reversed? Do you see any way for this to be remedied?
Well, I'm laughing because I don't want to end an interview like this on a bad note. Right now, it looks really bad. I'm not going to lie. I don't like lying. I don't want to make things sound optimistic when they are not. We are about, in New York City in particular, we are about to embark on 4 truly and deeply scary 4 years. So, do I think it's going to get better under Mamdani? No. Do I see a way out under Mamdani? I don't. I don't, except to stand up and speak out. And that's why what I tell people is, are we going to win in the end? Yes. In the end, we are going to win. I don't know when the end is. The end could be 75 years from now. It could be not in our lifetimes, not in our kids' lifetimes. The Jews always end up surviving, but we always end up surviving with unfathomable costs. That's the problem. And do I see the potential for unfathomable costs? Oh my God. I hate to say this on your podcast. You've been so nice and so gracious. I do see that potential. And as a grandchild of Holocaust survivors, I do see the unfathomable loss potential. I see it because we have a mayor who's a complete Marxist, Islamist, radical lunatic. The streets are not going to be safe. You're going to see, I guarantee you one thing right now. Here's a prediction, okay? I guarantee you're going to see people boycotting Jewish businesses in New York City over the next 4 years, something we haven't seen since 1930s Germany. I guarantee it because he has already said that he supports boycotting of anybody connected in any way to Israel. And that's really scary. When you are bordering on events that led up to Kristallnacht, that is very scary. So what I say to everybody is, this is the time. If you ever thought about speaking out but didn't, stand up, speak out. If you ever hesitant, you weren't sure, now is the time to become sure. It's never been more dire, never been more serious. We can turn this only if anybody who has the power and who can stands up and speaks out to defend ourselves.
Well, thank you so much for that unbelievable thought, because that is the point of this show. The point of this show is to arm all of my listeners with information, with the truth, so that they can go out into the real world and speak with whomever they come encounter with, be it a taxi cab driver, an Uber driver, their doorman, somebody in the grocery store who might challenge them for being Jewish or for any of their values, and they're able to actually speak the truth and say what the truth is. So I thank you so much for giving us the inside scoop on what's happening at CUNY and actually more broadly across our universities. And thank you for being such a strong voice for speaking out and, you know, and really putting yourself on the line. I know we didn't get to the fact that you were actually sued by, by the union or by CUNY. And I would love to reserve that for a later show so that you can tell us about what happened with that. But this conversation has been both powerful and very sobering. And you've helped us see what's happening at CUNY. It's not accidental. It's not isolated. It's the result of deliberate choices that allowed anti-Semitism, anti-Americanism, ideological extremism to take root in our educational systems. But you've also shown us that there's a pathway forward and that we need to speak out just as you have been doing. So thank you so much for your honesty, your insight, and your courage. Thank you for fighting this fight on behalf of students, faculty, and the future of our country. So thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you for having me, Trudy. It was a pleasure.
To our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. This has been Nothing But the Truth with Trudy Stern. You can catch us every Thursday at 9:30 p.m. on the radio. But if you've missed any part of this show or you want to listen to any of our past podcasts, you can find Nothing But the Truth wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, stay strong, stay informed, and keep seeking nothing but the truth.